Hello, and good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is that you're actually in where you're at. This is our lecture for service quality management and the employee role in service delivery, or ultimately GAP 3. So I'll do my best to record this slowly this time, but we'll see how that works. So at any rate, when we're talking about the employee role, there's several things we need to put in context that we're going to talk about in this lecture. First is briefly what we mean by service culture, the service culture of the organization, if you will. The critical importance of the service employee, because this is what's leading to GAP 3 that we're going to talk about, is the employee. It's a key element of it. Boundary spanning roles, we've talked a little bit about that previously, so we'll expand on that. And then strategies for delivering service quality through people, and that's a really key point, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And ultimately, customer-oriented service delivery. Those are the key areas for today. Service culture, a culture where an appreciation for good service exists, and where we're giving good service to internal as well as ultimately external customers is considered a natural way of life and one of the most important norms by everyone in the organization. And that's a great quote. Important point in there about the fact that it's internal, and most of what we're going to talk about here in this lecture has to do with the concept of the internal employee, not the external employee. We'll talk a little bit about that because obviously you can't have one without the other because it's a service, right? So the main point of that being that the main focus of GAP 3 is actually on the employee. So let's talk about making promises. We've talked a little bit about guarantees before, but let's making promises, keeping promises, enabling promises. So first, in making promises, we have to understand customer needs. We have to manage expectations. Traditional marketing communications in terms of how we communicate what we do, our sales promotion, advertising, internet website communication, all of that. And the context that we're going to be talking about it in this lecture, this is primarily focused on the communication to and with the employee. GAP 4 will talk more about how that relates to the customer, but we're talking really in particular about the employee. And the first point about understanding customer needs, we've already talked about, and GAPs 1 and 2 are really key to that in terms of setting the expectations for the guest. Keeping the promises is the service delivery. You're all working on service delivery systems, if you will, of the various hotel companies that you're doing. And we're talking about the 5 areas of reliability, responsiveness, empathy, assurance, and tangibles. But we're also adding to that the element that we've been talking about in terms of recovery, flexibility as well. It's about all those face-to-face interactions, the customer experience, the moments of truth, if you will, that we have where we actually interact between the customer and the employee. Keeping those promises, I missed the, already said keeping the promises. Enabling the promises, hiring the right people. This is where we're really going to be keying in to the discussion for today's lectures. Hiring the right people, training and developing people to deliver service, employee empowerment, support systems, technology, the right technologies for the right place, for the right jobs, and rewards and incentives. And a good deal of this is expanded on even further within the human resource context in which you're learning in that particular module. So there's a lot of connection between this GAP 3 and the human resource function because we're talking about the internal employee. As we've talked about earlier on in the trimester in this particular module, it's a combination here of company management, customers, employees. So when we're talking about the company and the customer, we're talking about external marketing, setting the promises, if you will. And that's a lot of the element of GAP 4, and a great deal of GAP 4 is going to be focused on that. The internal marketing between the company and the employee, enabling the promise, is a critical part of what we mean in GAP 3. And then, of course, we have that uniqueness of a service that you don't have within a good, of the employee and the customer, or the interactive marketing, which is truly the delivering on the promise. Okay? So that's the setting of what we were just talking about in terms of making, keeping, and enabling promises. So the importance of the service employee. They are the service, right? It's the inseparability issue. They represent the organization. They are the ones who ultimately express the culture, the service culture that we have. They're the brand. They're what we typically refer to as the representative of what we want to be, what we were trying to be. And when we go through and you do your presentations and you learn more from others about the other companies in the business, the key will be, how do they differentiate their brand? What is it that makes them different? Because a lot of them have the same kind of systems. The question is, how do they then differentiate it? The employee, of course, is the marketer. They represent what you are in service. So they're important. They're part of the service mix. They're part of the service profit chain, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And they are part of that service triangle. So couldn't have a service without employees. That's really the key. So the ways that we use the service marketing triangle, we look at it from an overall strategic assessment aspect. How's the service organization doing on all three sides? If we have any issues with one or more of those sides, how we're dealing with it, where our weaknesses, where our strengths. And then the specific implementation is looking more towards what is being promoted, by whom, how we deliver that and by whom, and all the supporting systems, the promises of the service. Those are the key elements. So the service profit chain, really important aspect. And I have to tell you, I'm sure that if we were sitting here in a class right now and I asked you all the question, which I'll ask you so you think about it, does delivering service quality lead to profit? Is there a correlation? And what this depicts is that there is, and I think I would all say that, but the reality is it doesn't always come out in the proof of that in terms of how companies really deal with it. So this is an important concept to get across, and for you to truly believe, actually, is that the internal service quality, that's where it begins with the employee, right? The employee is satisfied, then you will have good employee retention, productivity, external service value, customer satisfaction, loyalty, revenue growth, and profitability, right? Sometimes in the hotel industry, Bill Marriott has been attributed to the saying that if you treat your employee right, they'll treat the customer right. In fact, that was not him, that was his dad. J.W. Marriott is the one who actually made that statement. Bill is a great guy, and I had the opportunity to get to know him and work with him, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. But he is a bottom line financial guy. His dad was the people person. He was ultimately the one who probably would be the epitome of this particular service profit chain. He really truly believed that. So if you start with treating the employee right, it leads through that whole process to the end of revenue growth and profitability. So service employees, they are the service, right? We've talked about that. They're the organization eyes, they're the brand, they're the marketers, the importance of the evidence. Okay? So who are they? Well, we're going to talk in a second about boundary spanners. I think we mentioned this earlier on in the module. We talked about the concept of the people who are the face people, if you will, with the service. They're the ones who represent that. And what are the jobs like? Emotional labor. I know you've heard that term before. Certainly a term that's used in the context of human resources. It's the issue of that we're not just there to perform a task, but we have an emotional connection. We have the empathy. We have the assurance. We have those kind of things reliability, responsiveness, all those kind of things that we're talking about there. So, and there are many sources of potential conflict, of course, because we have people. With not building machines, we don't have the bots out there, the robots, and we're talking about people. So there's the person role. We'll talk about that, organization and the client, the inner client activity. Not just the employee, sometimes it's other customers, and the quality and productivity. So boundary spanner, it's the interaction between the internal and the external constituents, as it states. So what we're talking about is the people in the blueprint, if you will, that are the frontline people, not the ones that are in the second and third levels behind that, but the ones that are out there actually interacting. They represent you. Your brand, as it was said, they are your marketing, they're everything. This is the connection. These are the people that make what you are. especially in the hotel side, but in the restaurant side as well too. The role of the boundary spanner, well, they're the critical link, obviously, between the internal and external. They're how the customer, if you will, depicts who you are, what you are. The information resources and so on. They're what people see, and of course, as a result of that, and many of you, most of you, if not all of you, are going to end up in roles where you're boundary spanners. And so it's going to be high stress. It's just the reality of it. When you're dealing with people, they're not always the nicest to you, and some days aren't your best days. So there's always going to be those kind of issues that are out there on the table. So in the question that I will ask you, and I'm not going to put this up on poll everywhere, but I want you to think about this for a few minutes and decide, what do you think? Which of the following is not a boundary spanner in a hotel? And this is an important one, so I want you to think about it. I'm not going to give you the answer right away. Okay? I want you to think about it. I want you to circle, put it down on paper, whatever you think it is, and I will tell you later. In fact, I'm making a note to myself right now to make sure that I do tell you later, so that I let you know what the correct answer is. Front desk agent, housekeeper, sales manager, bell person, the employee uniform room attendant. I'd say remind me when I get later on in the lecture, but you're not here to remind me, so I have to remind myself. Okay, gap 3. All right, we're getting closer, right? Gap 3, gap 4. We're more than halfway through now in terms of what we're talking about. What is gap 3? Gap 3 is the service delivery issue and the gap between the customer-driven service standards and designs. So what we've said here now, going backwards, is the first gap was about understanding what the customer wanted, right? So if we understand what the customer wants, we're satisfied with gap 1. If we then design the right services for what we think is appropriate for those needs that we know, we've now filled gap 2. So gap 3 means we've done the services, we put them in place, we put those service systems that you're learning about, the recovery system and the service systems in place, but now they don't function properly because the internal employee does not understand what they are, or for many different reasons, which we're going to discuss in terms of the various aspects. So in diagnosing where you have service problems, you first look at 1, 2, now you're at 3. Okay, so if 1 and 2 are in good shape, then the issue becomes, what about 3? So we have deficiencies in human resource policies. That's one thing. We didn't hire the right people. We didn't give them the right instructions or the job descriptions or the right training for what they needed to do. We didn't give them the right technology, all these kind of things. We'll talk more about those. We failed to match supply and demand. In other words, we didn't get the right number of people, the right places, and so on. And in fact, we've talked already about that a little bit, because that has a lot to do with weighting strategies, managing demand. That's what we're talking about here. Customers not fulfilling their roles is another issue. In other words, sometimes the problem isn't between the employee and the customer, it's between other customers and the customers, and how that interacts and interferes with the process of what you're trying to do. And then problems with service intermediaries. How do we deal with channel conflicts and issues in terms of others who are extending our brand, if you will, and who we are in the process. So that's the issues that were around gap 3. The things, the causes of it that we're going to talk more in depth about have to do with role ambiguity, role conflict, employee job fit and technology job fit, supervisory control, lack of empowerment, teamwork. How do we close it? Well, role clarity, right? We have to make sure that people know they have the right training for the jobs, they understand what they're supposed to do. Talk more about that too. In eliminating role conflict, that seems kind of like an easy thing to say, not always as easy to do. Improve on the technology and the job fit. For those of you who are in service innovation, this is a big factor we've been talking about all trimester long. The employee selection, employee training, and cross-training on those technologies that we've been talking about in that module that others of you will have in service innovation later, and how that interacts with making the customer and the service innovation. Measuring and rewarding service performance. How do we compensate? How do we put the right recognition in place? What rewards do we give to teams, and so on? Empowering service employees, a critical element in today's environment. throughout the world, and something that is a really key issue to here in Singapore, if you will. And then building teams and teamwork, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But in fact, the last two items, empowerment and team building, are in my more of a human resources module discussion in much more detail than we'll talk about in this class. Very important wheel, if you will, and I'll call this the human resource strategy wheel. That'll be my depiction of it. I want to spend some time on this because this is a really critical element to this whole discussion on GAP 3, and I think it's the key to it. You have four different things taking place here. First, you have to hire the right people, right? You have to develop those people. You have to provide the needed service systems for them, and then you have to retain them. Really important last element is retaining them. So in hiring the best people, let's look at that in a little more depth, what we have here. First, you have to compete for the best people. How do you do that? How do you compete for the best people? You know, this past week, you're seeing this later on, but this past week, back yesterday, when I'm recording this, you had the industry breakfast. And the industry breakfast was about companies coming to you and trying to show you that they're looking for the best ones of you. How did they do that? What did they do? Did they talk to you about interviews? Did they put you through behavioral testing? Are there things that they did on that basis? You know, how do we compete for the right people? Hiring for service competencies and service inclination is the next one. And a lot of the companies out there in the business today, particularly those in the hotel industry today, use the behavioral or personality profile aspects to determine whether you have the right capabilities, the right attitudes, the right background, if you will, to be able to actually deliver on that service promise that they want to have. So they're trying to compete for you, and they're doing that. And then they want to become preferred employers. So think about this. In the industry breakfast, what did the companies that you thought stood out, what did they do that showed you that they wanted to be a preferred employer? How did they do it? Well, one of the things they did is they showed up for that, right? The companies weren't there. I mean, there may be different reasons for it, obviously. So, but let's assume that some of them weren't as interested in getting students in IWSPs or in IA experiences with them. Well, maybe they are not looking to be the preferred employer when you graduate. You know, by having you come and work for them for 8 months in an IWSP, they're going to be looking at you as a preferred employer. They want to be where you have a choice later on. The same thing with the IA experience that some of you are going to go through. So really important points. How do you compete for the best people? How do you get the message across? What kind of things do you do to find the right people so that they come to work for you and not your competition? And hiring for those competencies, being the preferred employer. Now, looking at developing the people. Now you've hired. So key point. First area is about finding the right people. Now you've got them on board. The other three are about those things you do once you have them on board. So you develop people to deliver service quality. So you train for technical interactive skills. That seems pretty obvious, right? All the various training aspects you would do. You empower employees, and then you promote teamwork. As I said, a lot of this is the basic principles of human resources. That those of you who will take the human resource, all you will take the human resource model, that you'll learn in that aspect. Providing the needed support systems. Again, measuring internal service quality. That's what we're talking about in terms of the measurements that you're looking at in your projects. What are they doing to make sure that the systems that have been put in place, the various service systems, service recovery systems that were there, how do they measure whether they're being successful? And then they provide the support and technology and equipment. The support technology and equipment that relates to that role, that job. And when that doesn't work, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And developing service-oriented internal processes. So that's the customer service systems, the service recovery systems. Those are the things that we have in place to be able to deliver on the service culture, the brand, the things that we want as an organization. Very important point that we won't spend a lot of time on in this module. But if you talk to the industry today, probably their biggest concern, in fact, their biggest concern about you is that you're going to go out there and spend a year or two with them, and then you're going to leave the industry altogether That's the biggest scare that they have. So retaining the best people, really critical area, including employees in the company vision. And I'm going to give you a link to a video of it's a grocery store chain in the United States called Stu Leonard's that I will have as one of the other videos that you'll have for this week about what they did to include the companies in the vision, and the employees rather in the vision. They really ask for and get support from those employees. Treat employees as customers. This is what we're talking about here. The whole triangle. Understanding the role that the employee and the customer are an entity that work together. So we have to be able to treat employees as customers, and measuring reward by strong service performers. Rewarding them, showing the employee of the month, or all the other things that we can allude to. And again, a lot of these are human resource policies. It says human resource strategies, but if you're trying to deliver a customer service, all of these four have to be in place. Now, what should you know for the future? You should be able to describe actions within the hiring of the right people. What would you do to hire the right people? How would you develop them? We won't spend as much time on that because that will be more of a focus of human resources, as well as providing needed support systems, retaining the best people. So important, we'll know it. Employee ambiguity. What do we mean by that? Well, uncertainty about expectations and how to satisfy the job. If you have been put in an internship position or worked in a part-time job where when you got there, you had no idea what to do, where to go, who to talk to, you felt kind of lost in the process, that's what we mean. That's role ambiguity. You really don't know what you're supposed to be doing. So how does it happen? No service training, no service skills, lack of knowledge of performance evaluation. You don't even know what you're supposed to be measured on, what you're doing, and no reward system for doing a good job. Or for that matter, no system in place to know when you're not doing a good job. So those are the things that cause it. So how do we provide role clarity? Then obviously if we have ambiguity, what we need is clarity, right? So we have to have accurate role information. You need to know what the job description is. And by the way, any job description you get is fluid. It's not going to be an absolute in this day and age. It's going to have to change, and sometimes you have to change it too. So don't get locked into thinking that the job is just what it says on paper. Specific and frequent information on expectations. We need to know what the customer's expectations are. Goals, strategies, objectives, we need to know those for the company. That's the mottos, the credos of Ritz-Carlton we've talked about. That's the systems that you're looking at and putting in place. Current and complete information about products and services. It goes back to assurance, right? It's one of the key elements. We need to understand and know about what we're actually delivering. So customers, knowing who they are, their expectations, and how to handle those service encounter problems or the service recovery systems. Employee role. Okay. Attaching a position in an organization, setting behaviors, defining expectations. Boundary spanner. What is a boundary spanner supposed to do? Make sure that the employee knows how they're supposed to interact and relate to that customer, right? How are they supposed to do it? Here's a defining job role in a real true sense. You notice that only one small section of this is a job description. All the rest of it has to do with how you're going to communicate with them, interpersonal skills, what the company culture is, service skills that they need to know, customer expectations, product knowledge. So there's much more to it than just giving somebody a job description. My experience with job descriptions are that I look at them when I'm applying for the job, and after that, I look at them as being, as I said, fluid, changing all the time. You change them, they change them. It's not something that has to be static because of all the other elements around. We're the service industry. Ritz-Carlton quality selection process. How do they create role clarity? Well, I want to spend a minute on this. This is what I was alluding to before in terms of the processes that companies use today to be able to make those determinations about hiring people with the right skill set to deliver a service. Ritz-Carlton put in place several years ago a process in the States, and I'm presuming they probably use it here in Asia as well, where first the applicant has to take a behavioral test before they even get an interview of any type whatsoever. Now, in Ritz-Carlton's case, what they're looking for is they're looking for the various aspects of that person's personality, their behavior, how they react to things, as to which ones are going to have the best potential to succeed in the kinds of roles that they have. And they want to match each employee to the job that's available. Or if they find a good employee, find the job that's going to match them. So one way or the other, you're looking either for someone to fit the job that you need or someone you like to fit a job that's good for them. That's the role of it. It's used frequently, as it is actually in the Ritz-Carlton situation, to actually screen you out. Now, I don't know how you feel about that, but I personally would like to know how the results of that survey came out for me and know what it is that are my strengths for it, what are my weaknesses for that job, why is it the right one for me. And I think that's a key element, but that's not how it's necessarily being used. It's being used to make sure that you get the right person, right place. And I just use Ritz-Carlton as an example. There are many that do it that way. Role conflict. Well, that's the inability to satisfy job demands. This could be caused by a lot of things. This is a serious issue, right? This is service versus sales priorities. We're being told that we have to deliver a certain kind of service, and we think that that's unrealistic because it's pushing volume too much, because it's being based on the fact that we just need to have more money coming in the door. Multiple demands, multiple duties, understaffing. I have to do somebody else's job because they're not good at it, excess paperwork, role overload, all the things. It's the serious issues that are reasons that you quit often. You quit because you don't think the boss has a really strong idea of what the job really is supposed to be done and asks you to do more than you should be doing and doesn't have a really good sense of it, and maybe even sometimes asks you to do things that you feel are unethical. And that could be a real problem, right? Somebody asks you to do something you feel is illegal or unfair or discriminatory in some way or another, and you don't feel that that's how you feel about it, but yet you have to do it. That's a real challenge, isn't it? You know, that's a role conflict. That's an issue you sometimes have to decide whether this is the right place for you or not. So how do you solve it? Well, define the roles and the standards in terms of customer expectations. Think about what the customer thinks about first before you think about what your own bottom line profit is, before you think in terms of the issues that the customer would perceive. How do they see that role? Include employees in the standard setting. You, as the employee, the boundary spanner, if you will, have the best look. You have the best feel of what's there. You're going to know what's happening more than anybody else. Focus on performance measurement systems, customer in addition to the internal efficiency goals. So look at the way we perform the service in terms of the service culture we want as a priority, and maybe even over the fact that we want to be more efficient. This is one of the worries and concerns about being more productive. You know, we've heard a lot in Singapore, and I've been at a number of different conventions, functions lately, where the whole idea of productivity is brought up. And the question sometimes is, well, does productivity just mean less employees? And it shouldn't. It shouldn't mean less employees. More efficient, more effective employees. You put technology in place to allow the employee to have more face time with the customer, not necessarily to eliminate the employee so that the customer doesn't have to interact with them. So you have to think about those kind of things. Training and priority setting, that's an important one. Compensation tied to delivery of service. Breaks and varied work tasks. Don't overwork the people that work for you. Per employee job to job fit, or per employee to, poor technology to job fit. These are issues caused by that hiring process. You hired somebody you liked, but you put them in the wrong job. Or you hired somebody who really didn't have the right competencies because you didn't screen them through the right kinds of things, didn't look back at their CV, their past background, things of that nature. So matching job tasks and skills to abilities. Sometimes a person can be really good at a particular thing, but they're not really good at one of the skills that you need them to do. So you will have somebody else do that skill. Keep that employee and do something else. Poor compensation, equipment in aspects of it, outmoded technology. This is a big issue in our business. Unfortunately, we're not a technology leader. We oftentimes have technology that's well behind the curve in terms of what's being used in other areas. It's really hard for people who come into our business who haven't been in it before, and they're used to much more technologically focused aspect of it. Sometimes it's hard for them to adjust. The fact that we just don't have those kind of systems, or excuse me, those kinds of technology. So what happens is the employee has a problem with language skills, interpersonal skills. They can't relate to them. The employee feels unimportant in the organization. And what happens when that happens? Well, it goes right back to the customer, doesn't it? So things just start going downhill. So let me ask you something. What would be your preferred option to create a good employee job fit? What would your preferred option be? Using a Ritz-Carlton qualifying system that we just talked about, interviewing multiple employees for every position, trusting your instinct for the interview that you can identify the right person, hiring people with previous experience in the same position, or having many people in your organization interview the candidate. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually pose this question to you again when we actually get back in class, but I'm also going to give you the answer to the earlier question. So while you're thinking about this one, pause for a moment and go back to the boundary spanner. So which one did you put down? Who's not the boundary spanner? Well, the front desk agent, there certainly is. That's pretty obvious, right? Housekeeper. Well, you might think they're back of the house, but no, they're on the floor. They're interacting with customers, aren't they? They're an important one, sometimes forgotten, but an important one. Sales manager, you think, well, they're working downstairs in the basement. That's usually where the sales office is. But who are they working with? They're working with the customer. They're working with the person who's organizing the events, planning and organizing the meetings. So they're definitely a boundary spanner for you. They're out there in the trade show floor, talking to potential future customers and so on. No, definitely. Bell person, another obvious one. So the employee room attendant, employee uniform room attendant. Why? They're the ones. That's the one that's not a boundary spanner. Why? Because they're servicing the employee, not the customer. They're back of the house. So think about this one here, and we'll come back to this one at a later point, because I'd be interested in seeing face to face what your thoughts are on this one. So remind me when we get back in class that we're talking about this one so that I don't miss it. All right, let me get up to date with my notes in front of me here. Make sure I get to the right point where we're at. Okay, inappropriate supervisory control. That's another issue we have on the table. The focus on quantity based on goals rather than service quality. This is going to happen. You're going to find it. If you haven't already, it's going to happen. So what do you do about it? You observe employee behavior. You watch it. You try and help it. You get shopper research. What do I mean by shopper research? Mystery shoppers. You have people that you hire, their organizations, companies, hotel business in particular, that will come in and they'll pretend as if, they will actually be a customer, but they're actually there to rate you. And they go through and do that. In fact, when I was at San Francisco State years ago, Hyatt Regency in San Francisco came to us and said, we have an outside company that does this, but we want to get a better handle on what the younger generation thinks. So they actually brought in 4 or 5 of our students, and they allowed them to come and stay for the weekend and so on, put the charges on their credit card, and then they paid them back. So as they wanted to get an idea of what the real younger generation felt. Customer comments, complaint analysis, performance reward, all those kind of things that are what we need to put in place in order to make sure that things are happening. Customer complaint analysis we've talked about before. How do we do that? How do we identify it? Lack of perceived control. What happens? Well, we think that we don't have the ability to make the outcomes. Has that ever happened to you? Very common problem in Asia. We don't necessarily let the employee know that they can make the decisions that they need to make. The solution is empowerment. Giving people from the lowest level, the bottom of the organization chart, if you will, the ability to make those kinds of decisions that they need to make. Give them the authority for the service decisions. I mentioned that just now, replacing the standard procedures so that we give more flexibility. We set guidelines instead of standard operating procedures, if you will. And eliminating multiple approval for problem solving. Huge issue. Multiple approval. Huge issue in Asia. I'm sorry, I got to have this person. I don't know how many times I've had to go through that in my times in Asia. Not that it doesn't happen in the U.S., by the way, it does. But the issue here is even more so that way sometimes, that people can't make a decision unless they talk to somebody about them. So empowerment is the benefits: quicker responses, employees feel better, you interact better with customers, you feel empowered, you have positive word of mouth customers. All that stuff sounds really great, right? Why wouldn't we do it for everybody? It doesn't work in every situation. That will be something that you'll go into more depth in human resources on. But the drawbacks of it is, hey, it calls for more investment in selection and training to the people that you hire. You have to have higher labor costs because you have a higher level employee, right? Slower, inconsistent delivery because different people approach things differently. And it may violate the customer's perceptions of fair play. They don't feel that that employee should be the one making the decision. They want to talk to the manager. And there's always this fear that they're going to give away the store. But as I think I've mentioned earlier on, with the Ritz-Carlton Service Recovery Program, where they allow employees up to USD $2,000 to make decisions on over the history of that, the experience that I've been told about from Ritz-Carlton human resource people, they've never had to be concerned about that. And in fact, they probably pay out, the employee probably pays out less than maybe what the general manager might do in making the same decision. So we have a traditional organization chart, as we talked about before. You usually have manager, supervisor, and then you got all the frontline employees, all of the boundary spanners, if you will, and they are the ones that face the customer. But look at that organization chart. Who's on top? The manager has to make the decisions, the supervisor. Too many layers, right? Too many layers. So what's a better way to look at an organization chart? Flip it, the flip chart, right? The customer's on top. This isn't always easy to do, by the way, but we'll put the customer on top of the frontline employee. Then who is it that you want to make sure you get the most information from or give the most authority to in order to make decisions? Well, the frontline employee. So how can you do that? The supervisor has to be able to give up control but give training. The manager has to be able to work with the supervisors to make sure that the company culture and the issues that are there are in place. So if you look at the customer first, doesn't mean the manager is not in a position. It means that the manager has to be able to make sure that the people at the front line can deal with the customer. So we invert the pyramid, right? We invert the pyramid. So now we have providers and customers on top. The interactive marketing is number one, the delivering of the promise. The provider to the company, the internal aspect, is just enabling the process. The customer to the company is making the promise. It's the internal marketing aspect, if you will. It's the thing that makes the things click from an internal perspective. Lack of teamwork? Well, pulling together for a common goal is one way to do it. How do you encourage teamwork? Oh yeah, that was a question. That was a question for you. How do you encourage teamwork? Put down some of your thoughts. What do you think? How do you encourage teamwork? What do you do in that process? We won't spend a lot of time on this because, as I said, I think this is a human resource issue. Okay, but let's talk about some examples of empowerment and teamwork. When we're talking about this, what we're referring to is we're talking about the issue of having everybody work together, putting things in the process. So I want you to think about ways that you felt empowered, ways that you felt that you had the right kind of decisions to make and the right kind of teamwork aspect to do. What are some of those examples that you had where you felt that way? And where didn't it work effectively? Where did you have that issue in place? Well, going back to the empowerment issue, in terms of one of the examples we showed earlier, was the Disney Hakuna Matata. It was how you gave that employee the ability to go through the steps to make the decisions on a problem. Service recovery. How did you make the employee feel that they could do that? Now, in the end, as we talked about back then, being Disney, they still wanted to have an accounting for that. They wanted to know how much it cost, how much time was done, what the employee did, and there were several copies of the form, if you remember, that they asked for in different levels. So, how much of that was done from that perspective. And from a teamwork standpoint, does everything have to be done in a team? Sometimes we have to think about the fact that some things need to be done individually, but we need to keep people in the team informed. What do we do from those examples? That's, again, further discussion, probably in human resources, but think about some of those good examples. All right, customer role in service delivery. Let me back up a second to another example. I'm going to, again, assign you the Stu Leonard video. And the Stu Leonard video is really about that, about teamwork, how the organization works as a team, the empowerment of the employee. But Stu has a big rock that's out in front of the place. And he doesn't, in the videos you're going to see, it doesn't say the whole story that I've heard in a separate video that I used to use when it was on VHS. Apparently they never converted that over. He said when he was a young man, and you'll hear this in the video, just starting the store, a woman came up to him and said, "Your eggnog, Christmas eggnog," which is a milk product if you're not familiar with that, and we in the Western world will eat, probably came to us from Europe though. And he said, "This is bad. It's not good." And so he smelled it and he looked at it and he thought, "There's nothing wrong with this." And she said, "Well, you're wrong. I'm never coming back to your store." And he went, "Oh my God!" And he just was heartbroken. He thought, I just started this business and now this woman is never going to come back to my store again. So he went out and found this big rock and he put this out in front of the place. And he said that there's two rules at Stu Leonard's. The first is the customer is always right. The second is, if the customer is ever wrong, read rule number 1. I don't know whether we should believe that the customer is always right. Southwest Airlines founder Herb Kelleher has said that sometimes the customer can be wrong. If they're mean and nasty or threatening to an employee, they could be wrong. But the point would be you still have to treat them with respect. Okay, customer role in service delivery. This is another last element that we want to discuss in terms of this, is that it's not just always about employee and the customer. Sometimes we have issues with other customers and customers, right? The behavior of other customers sometimes leads to the behavior of the customers that are there. We're not talking about a term that's sometimes used in the negative aspect of mob behavior, where one person does something and everybody follows behind it, but we're talking more about how this interaction with other customers is in place. So the customer has to know what their role is. They're important in that whole service delivery, right? They need to know what they need, what's in place, and we need to understand that from a self-service technology standpoint. Ultimately, how much participation does the customer need to have? We're all used to ATMs. We know how to use those today. That's very much a self-service technology, right? But checking into a hotel, does every customer feel comfortable with that? Do they know what they're supposed to do? Do they understand how they're supposed to do it? So we have to have strategies in place in order to enhance that customer role. So how do customers widen gap 3? Remember, gap 3 is the standards in the employee, right? So if the customer doesn't understand their role, then the employee may not be able to deliver the service that they're expected to be able to deliver because the customer is getting in the way of that. They're not willing or able to perform the roles that they have. There's no rewards for good performance, interfering with other customers, incapable or incompatible market segments, so the wrong people in the wrong places. How do we get through that? How do we understand that better? Well, in the customer role, we need to have them as productive resources. We have to make sure that they contribute to the service quality and satisfaction, and we have to realize that sometimes customers can be competitors to each other, especially in a queuing environment of an attraction like Universal Studios, Sentosa. You know, how you think about what the role is and what you do, and if somebody cuts in front of you or goes into the line aspect of it, it doesn't make you feel very good, right? So sometimes the employee then has to be able to come in and say, well, the standard and the policy and procedure that the company put in place is not working because the people are not understanding what they're supposed to be doing. So we have to educate them. So we make them partial employees. They contribute to the effort, things that we do. That's where we look at some of the technologies and the productivity aspect that's sometimes talked about. The productivity issue. What do we do to make things more productive by getting the customer to be more participative in their own decisions and their own aspect of it? Do you have to call in a hotel down to room service to find out what the soup of the day is, for example? Or is it making them a part of it by going online and finding out, or the iPad in the room, or whatever it is, and it already shows where they can find that information out? Make them more productive in the process. Customer inputs can be effective to organizational productivity, as I just said. Key issues, customers' roles, it can be expanded or reduced depending on what kind of service we're trying to deliver and how effective that can be. They contribute to service quality, don't they? The satisfaction is performed and they say good things about you. Where do we hear that? Where do we hear the quality of service they receive? By asking questions and taking responsibility and all those kind of things, or how we handle service failure. Where do we hear about those results? Where do we hear about those? I know you were just saying it out loud to yourself. TripAdvisor. Yes, okay, we come back to TripAdvisor. What a great tool that is today to be talking about. When I first started teaching about service quality management, we didn't have TripAdvisor to do those kind of things for us. But today we hear about that. We get the customer complaints. We see all those kind of things, and we see them in writing, and so does everybody else. So there's another way that customers can be a competitor if they start talking about negative things in the process, and then that creates a problem for you in terms of how you relate to other customers. So the importance of customers, they can detract from the satisfaction with disruptive behaviors, excessive crowding, incapable of meeting their needs. We don't understand them very well. If you go to an exhibition and you go to register, they always have different queues for different types of things. So they'll have a queue over here for media, they'll have a queue for exhibitors and a queue for attendees and so on. That's important to make sure that we don't have the person who maybe takes longer to register in front of somebody who doesn't. And how do we make sure that those kind of processes are in place? If we just have one long queue, that can be quite challenging. We don't understand the various aspects of how that person, how those people are going to register and what's going to happen. I recently went to the ITB Asia show, and I was in this weird situation of where I was given a pass because of the other conference I was at, and there was no queue for that. So I went and stood in one queue that seemed logical, but that person was taking a long time. And then I heard somebody else say over to the side, oh, you're with this conference, this is where you go. So I went, oh, okay. So I followed what another customer did. There was no instructions or anything in terms of that place. So that detracted from my satisfaction, if you will. So we enhance it by our presence. Customers make that service, that's who we are, shows who we are. Go back to our industry breakfast. You guys were the enhancement. You are the ones who made all of that work and how all those actions came through and worked together. So strategies for enhancing customer participation, we need to think about that. Let's start on the left-hand side here. First, define the customer jobs. What is it that we want the customer or need the customer to do? The more automated, if you will, technology focused that we make the job, the more important it is that we give the right instructions to that customer so that they perform it properly, so they're going to have the right service and be satisfied with what they're doing. Manage the customer mix. One of the examples that I give in that I may have given to you previously is the way the Shangri-La Singapore is built. The Valley Wing for the high-end customer, the Tower Wing for the group customer, the Garden Wing for the resort or vacation kind of customer, if you will. Different mixed, different places. They even had different registration counters for customers coming in with tour groups, for example, making sure that you have the customers in the right place. And then recruit, educate, and reward customers. Your loyal customers through your loyalty programs, you give them points that make them, and then you give them advantages. You give them the free Wi-Fi, if you will. You give them the advantage of selecting a room themselves, all those kind of things that can happen. You know, you do things to make them feel that they can participate in their own customer satisfaction. How am I doing on my speed aspect, right? Probably still rolling right along like usual, but at any rate, I hope that you're following, okay? You can always slow it down. That's a good thing. So strategies for enhancing them, as I just said, okay, more detail of defining the customer roles, helping oneself, helping others, promoting the company, finding ways to do that. Promoting the company, go back to TripAdvisor again. How do you get people on your own website to say good things about you or lead them to that? Recruit, educate, reward customers. Hey, that's something we just discussed. So educating them, figuring out what their job is, rewarding them, and avoiding the negative outcomes of inappropriate customer participation by taking that off to the side, finding other ways to deal with that. And of course, managing that customer mix. Customers as competitors. Okay, here's another aspect to think about. Customers as competitors. Customers may compete with other service providers. So they may compare you to somebody else because you're delivering a service. They may compare one employee to another. They may say that person just gave this person that, but I didn't get that. What happened? How come I didn't get that? Internal exchange versus external exchange. You know, make sure that the customer is, in terms of what they're doing, is relaying to your internal person what they have a concern about or what they expect to do versus taking it to those external channels. So decisions are made on expertise capacity, the ability, their understanding of it, their resources, time capability, economic rewards, psychic rewards, trust, control, all those kind of things. All those factors we're talking about there are all issues that we need to factor in when we think about customers being competitors to us or to others, to each other. So how do we manage all those kind of things? How do we get them to trust us and know that we're loyal? How do we get them to say, hey, I want to stay at Marriott when I go there because that's the place that I know is going to treat me with the most respect because they know me the best, for example. Compatibility management, interesting concept here. You know, a process of attracting homogeneous customers to the service environment, then actively managing both the physical environment and the customer-to-customer encounters in such a way as to enhance satisfying encounters and minimize dissatisfied encounters. Wow, that's a mouthful, isn't it? So what do we mean? Right customers, right product, right time, right price. If you've heard that before, then you've probably had revenue management. Revenue management is also a method for compatibility management, making sure that you have the right customers, right time, right place. You know, if you have a weekend when you're trying to sell a hotel at a low rate, you've got to make sure that the people that you bring in are not different than the people that you would normally have there and how that might conflict. And that's a part of what revenue management is about. It's about understanding how you get the right mix of customers, right time. When do you take certain conventions and meetings? During certain times, they're more productive for you than in other times. The example I would give you here is I remember years ago when I was working as a sales manager at downtown Chicago, one of my accounts was the Illinois Podiatry Association. And podiatrists were known for not being big spenders in the bars and in the restaurants. And they always met during the Easter holiday. Well, employees sometimes would get kind of negative about the group because they would say, well, they don't spend a lot of money and they just stand around in the lobby, something, the terminology that you might hear someday in the mice industry. They were lobby rats. They just hung around in the lobby, they didn't eat. Well, we had to educate our employees, because remember, this is internal marketing, right? We had to educate our employees on the fact that, hey, they wouldn't have any hours that week. They wouldn't be making any money that week had we not had that group in, because this was coming over a holiday week. So yes, they didn't spend as much money as those high-end groups that came the week before or the week after, but they kept everybody employed. They kept everybody with a job over that period of time. And sometimes you have to be able to get the employee to understand that as well. Now, at the same time, we wouldn't want to have a high-end corporate group coming in at the same time in the same place, and they wouldn't have because of the dates and the time they came, but we got to be careful of that because we're going to make sure that our image is not being incompatible, if you will. So characteristics of service that increase the importance of compatible segments. Customers are in close physical proximity to each other. That's a big challenge, right? So how do we do that? We have to come up with ways to spread things out or to put people in compatible areas. Airlines, how do they do it? They have first class, business class, and economy. They have different aspects of it. Verbal interaction takes place among customers. So we realize that customers talk to each other. Restaurants, other places, they're talking to each other. Attendees at conferences, they talk to each other. So we have to make sure that our experiences and the things we do with them are consistent. Customers are engaged in numerous and varied activities. They're doing all kinds of different things. They're taking advantage of different aspects of a hotel or a resort, as it mentions here, in terms of those things. The service environment attracts a heterogeneous customer mix. That's what I've been talking about. We got to be careful about segregating into the right places, if you will, the right customers, so that the incompatible ones don't get in the way of the compatible ones, if you will. The core of service is compatibility, making sure that we've got the right people, right places. Said that. Customers must occasionally wait for the service. We've discussed that last week. How do we put in the right management of demand strategies? And customers are expected to share time, space, and service utensils with each other. So we have to, again, be cognizant here of where and how we do that and the kind of conditions and so on that we're dealing with. We're talking about guest rooms where one person checks out, another checks in. How do we keep our cleanliness up? How do we make sure that everything's in place? If we have damage, how does it prepared? All those kind of things. So, in summary, believe it or not, we're coming to the end. Employee, customer, and company relationship is what is critical in this discussion. It's how that triangle operates. And then, I can't emphasize enough the importance of the human resource strategy. We'll talk more about that in depth as we come back in terms of before we start talking about our GAP 3, or GAP 4 rather, because it's such an important aspect. But I wanted to give you the basics of it, if you will, flip the classroom so that we can talk about that more in terms of your ideas. And then the customer role, how does the customer put in place? Those are the things that you should absorb from this. We'll talk more about them as we come back into class. And the one question that I left with you is, which way do you want to go about selecting the employees? So think about that one. We will talk about that in class. All right? Great. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and we'll see you